Who would have thought that the cinematic world would be shaken thoroughly by a gritty, politically charged sci-fi film by a first-time director from South Africa in 2009? Certainly not me. But District 9 was not a surprise hit. It makes sense why this movie reached that peak. Because this movie was a revelation. It didn't feature any A-list stars or Hollywood polish. Despite all of that, it managed to get everyone hooked, from audiences to critics, thanks to its bold storytelling and documentary-style visuals. No one could deny that the haunting allegory of state violence, xenophobia, and apartheid was not given to us tastefully. And the reason this movie was a breakout success was all thanks to Neil Blomkamp. He was a visual artist who took the directorial duties for this movie after conceiving the world of District 9 in a 2006 short film titled Alive in Joburg. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. In this movie, alien refugees known as prawns were stranded in Johannesburg, and as you can guess, they went through systemic discrimination. This short movie was barely more than 6 minutes long, but in those 6 minutes, it was able to give us the full story and more, attracting the attention of none other than Peter Jackson. As you can guess from the time frame, Peter Jackson was the hotshot because of his Lord of the Rings success. So when he saw Blomkamp's vision, he offered to produce the feature-length version. And hence, this short film ended up becoming District 9. Blomkamp and his wife, Terry Tatchell, worked together to expand the entire premise and give us a full-blown sci-fi drama where we followed Wikus Vandermeer, this bureaucrat played by Sharlto Copley, who ends up getting infected with alien DNA. We watch his unraveling as he slowly starts turning into the very thing that he was trained to oppress. In the beginning, the movie is a dark, comedic faux documentary, which swiftly devolves into a tragic tale of dehumanization, redemption, and of course, identity. The critics loved the movie from the get-go. Audiences were stunned by the visuals, the story, the message, everything. And soon enough, the Academy took notice. District 9 earned 4 Oscar nominations, and this was a big deal because it was unheard of for a sci-fi movie, even more so from a first-time director. Overall, this movie grossed over $210 million with a budget of just $30 million. So Blomkamp was immediately positioned as a visionary with a message. So, of course, the talk about a sequel began almost immediately. Blomkamp himself talked about the idea of a sequel in interviews. He said that the sequel, aptly titled District 10, was not only possible, but also mapped out. The ending of District 9 left a lot more to be explored. We had alien Christopher Johnson promise to help Wikus upon his return after 3 years. The movie cuts to black right after that promise, leaving the fate of Wikus completely unknown, except that he is now fully alien and hiding out in the slums. With an ending like that, fans were understandably hungry for resolution. And honestly, the end of District 9 was the perfect sequel hook. And in the interviews, Blomkamp seemed more than eager to deliver. But despite all of that eagerness, he made it clear that he would not rush it. He stated that District 10 would only happen if he could tell a story that had the same kind of emotional and socio-political beats as District 9. This reassured fans, but in a way, it was also ominous. After all, no one could say for sure when Blomkamp would have a story like that to tell. Years passed silently, and the promises about the sequel were there, being just vague enough to keep everyone hooked on them. The promises of, "We're working on something," and "It's in the early stages," started to sound more and more empty. So you gotta wonder, what happened? Well, here's the thing. Nothing was materializing, and Hollywood came calling for Blomkamp. He was now in hot water. He was a hot property. With a critical and commercial success like District 9 under his belt, studios were lining up with offers. Now, at this point, Blomkamp had 2 options. He could either stay in the world he built, or he could simply try something new while the spotlight was still on him. And he decided to choose the latter. Instead of diving into District 10, he turned into Allesium. Released in 2013, starring Matt Damon and Jodie Foster, this movie was far more ambitious than District 9. This movie explored similar themes to District 9, but on a global scale. In this movie, we have Earth, which was completely ravaged and impoverished, while the wealthy elite lived in a space station known as Allesium. The poor fought to survive, while the rich fought to keep them out. If you look at the bare bones of the movie, Allesium was the Hollywood version of District 9 with a Hollywood budget. And it kind of worked. The movie performed decently at the box office and grossed over $280 million worldwide, but it didn't get the critical acclaim that District 9 got. It was criticized for its heavy-handedness and the lack of character development. It was praised for the stunning visuals, but overall, it felt like Blomkamp was repeating himself. Despite that, Blomkamp still remained a respected figure. He was seen as someone who was trying to put something meaningful and thought-provoking in a genre that was usually dominated by spectacle and explosions. But by this point, fans were wondering about District 10. Was it happening? Where was it? And while the pressure rose, Blomkamp kept a consistent answer. He did not want to make a film when he did not have anything to say. If he could not bring the same authenticity in the follow-up, he would rather not fake it. In a way, you could say that this resistance and restraint were admirable. Blomkamp didn't fall for the Hollywood sequel machine. But on the other hand, the momentum from District 10 was also starting to fade. The longer the gap was, the more fans started to worry. And the fears of the fans heightened when Blomkamp moved on to his new project, Chappie, in 2015. This was another original sci-fi movie, and it also featured Sharlto Copley in a major role. This movie explored similar themes of marginalized figures, decay, and corrupt authority, but Chappie was weirder. It was more divisive and emotional, and, surprise, surprise, it did not land. Critics slammed the movie, and the audiences were confused. While some fans defended the uniqueness of this movie, most viewed it as a creative misfire. The script felt very messy, and the characters were inconsistent, to say the least. As a result, the movie's tonality was all over the place. And at this point, District 10 started to feel like a lost project. But Blomkamp was not done stirring the fan expectations. Around this time, he made a bold proclamation that he was working on a brand new Alien sequel, like a direct continuation of James Cameron's Aliens, ignoring Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection. He promised to bring back Sigourney Weaver's Ripley and Michael Biehn's Hicks. As you can guess, everyone was super excited. Concept art was released, and we saw both these fan-favorite characters aged and battle-worn. Blomkamp even got Weaver on board, and overall, it seemed like we were going to get the Alien sequel we have been waiting for. But then we got Radio Silence. And then, Alien Covenant. Ridley Scott came back to the franchise with a new prequel, and the studio shut down Blomkamp's Alien 5 in favor of Scott's vision. Blomkamp was out. So we have no Alien 5 and no District 10. By now, it seems like Blomkamp was stuck in a pattern. The moment it seemed like he would come back with something that would make him more famous, something else would get in the way, and with time, the glow of District 9 started fading. Another project, another promise, another delay. Over and over again. And now, District 10 was just a ghost. With so many years already gone and Blomkamp jumping from project to project, District 10 lost its luster. It was mentioned in the interviews, but nothing was ever officially announced. District 10 became more of a legend, and here's the thing. The truth behind the delay was not just studios getting cold feet. The delay was also deeply rooted in creative integrity and industry dissonance. Blomkamp made it perfectly clear that he would not be making the movie just because fans wanted it. In fact, the idea of a cash grab seemed to irk him. He wanted the sequel to be a continuation of the plot and reflect real-world issues. In his 2021 interview with Collider, he mentioned that he had no issues creating sequels, but District 10 needed to say something. Even though studios were ready for the sequel, Blomkamp kept stepping back, unsure about the story. And Hollywood does not wait around for anyone. While Blomkamp was repeatedly stepping back, his critical momentum was slowly starting to wane. Especially after Chappie's underperformance, his brand as a bankable visionary was eroded. Studios have never been very gung-ho about pushing science fiction stories that don't promise extra toy sales or cinematic universes. And now they were hesitant. What if District 10 could not recapture the magic? What if it ended up becoming something visually stunning, but a thematically overcooked misfire? Science fiction as a genre is pretty risky. If it doesn't land, it flops really hard, and without a promise of a megastar and a hook, Blomkamp was being cast aside as a niche auteur and not a franchise director. But this is just the superficial layer of the issue. Deep down, the problem was the tone. You see, Hollywood had already shifted dramatically since District 9 came out. By this point, the studios were obsessed with interconnected lore, IP mining, and of course, cinematic universes. And District 9, it was none of that. It was political, culturally specific, and extremely grounded and gritty. It was not one of those stories that you could easily make spin-offs of. Blomkamp, on the other hand, did not seem too bothered by that kind of landscape, though. He even started Oak Studios, this experimental film collective that produced mostly short-form sci-fi content. All of those movies had edgy themes and had no studio interference. This studio gave us movies like Firebase, Zygote, and Raka, which can be best described as raw, original, and grotesque. These movies were everything that Hollywood blockbusters weren't. But all of these movies were niche, and despite developing a cult following, they did not help in the creation of District 10. Another huge factor that affected the creation of this movie has to be the changing socio-political landscape. Back in 2009, when District 9 came out, immigration, othering, and systemic abuse were tackled more directly in the media. But now, especially in the post-Get Out and post-Black Lives Matter movement, the bar for storytelling has risen when it comes to allegorical storytelling. Blomkamp's subtle metaphors might just not land the way they did back in 2009, and they might even be seen as out of touch. And there were several questions about the setting as well. In multiple interviews, Blomkamp mentioned that if the movie did happen, District 10 might not take place in Johannesburg. He was considering changing the place to the United States and tackling issues like systemic racism, militarized policing, and mass incarceration. All of these themes are massive and worthy of exploration, yes, but the move away from South Africa sparked concern amongst the fans. What if by moving the whole South African context jeopardized the emotional authenticity of this sequel? What if District 10 lost the touch that made District 9 so deeply personal and touching? Hollywood executives, on the other hand, were wondering if District 10 would even make the money that District 9 did in the first place. And since Blomkamp did not deliver a clear timeline or a hook about the District 10 movie, the lack of those answers made the whole thing even worse. The longer the sequel stayed in limbo, the more the world around it moved, and new directors rose to prominence. Denis Villeneuve made Arrival and Dune. Jordan Peele gave us Nope and Us. And while all of this was happening, Blomkamp, the once messiah of science fiction, was stuck in time. By the end of the 2010s, District 10 went from a highly anticipated film to a cautionary tale. It was now a part of the internet's speculation culture. Several Reddit threads showed up discussing why District 10 did not happen. YouTube videos with millions of views discussed every single update about District 10, trying to understand if the movie is developing at all. District 10 is now a case study on how momentum dies with Indefinite Silence. And Blomkamp starts laying low. Interviews became sparse, and the updates were vague at best. Even though he never confirmed in exact words that the sequel was dead, he also never mentioned that the sequel was close to alive. In a lot of ways, District 10 ended up becoming a victim of its own potential. The bar for this movie was set impossibly high, and the thematic expectations were enormous. And somewhere down the line, the industry simply was not aligned with Blomkamp's vision. While he wanted authenticity and political urgency, Hollywood wanted IP leverage and brand extension. This disconnect created a deadlock, and thanks to that, the mapped-out and inevitable sequel drifted further and further from reality. After years of seemingly radio silence, in February 2021, out of nowhere, Neil Blomkamp tweeted that the District 10 screenplay is being written by him, Terry Tatchell, and Sharlto Copley. Just 13 words, and the internet completely lost its mind. All the fans who were waiting for 12 years finally had the confirmation that the sequel they were dying for was not an idea floating in the air anymore. It was an actual project. The fact that Terry Tatchell, the co-writer of District 9, and Sharlto Copley, the face of District 9, were in the back room working together gave everyone so much hope. District 10 was no longer a vague rumor. It was happening. This tweet was like vindication for longtime fans. Memes, reaction videos, and fan theories instantly took over social media. Reddit threads were alive again, speculating about the plot of the film. Would District 10 pick up from where District 9 left off? Would Weekus finally regain the humanity that he lost in the last film? Will Christopher Johnson come back with his very own alien fleet? Things were looking great, and fans were having a blast. But it was too good to be true, because then came the letdown. There was no additional information. There was no timeline, no concept art, and no casting update. There was no peep of a distributor either. And in an industry where everything is driven by momentum and hype cycles, this announcement soon started to feel hollow. Soon after, more red flags followed. Blomkamp revealed in interviews that the story was in the early developmental stage. He mentioned that he wanted to explore the new themes of systemic inequality and mass incarceration in America. This was hinted at as a major thematic shift. And while on the other hand, it aligned with Blomkamp's original intention, on the other hand, it raised concerns. District 9 was compelling because Blomkamp had lived through the issues he portrayed on screen. There was an authenticity about the issues, and a move to District 10 would definitely make the movie feel detached from what made the original one so powerful. However, the film that came out from Blomkamp in 2021 was not District 10. It was demonic. This was a low-budget supernatural horror movie where a woman uncovered secrets inside a virtual simulation. The movie was, well, not good. It flopped both critically and commercially. Critics cited the underwhelming visuals, a story without a punch, and the poor pacing, making this movie his weakest film to date. Fans were hoping that District 10 would be Blomkamp's return to form, but with Demonic, it felt the opposite. It seemed like a worrying sign that the director's creative edge was no longer there. Blomkamp explained that this movie was a COVID project. It was shot cheaply and made quickly, but by that time, the damage was done, and the buzz around District 10 started dying again. And as far as the movie is concerned, there were no trailers, no production stills, and no casting updates. There was no update about the movie at all. And whenever Blomkamp's name showed up in the headlines, it was not in connection with District 10. It was always about older projects, all retrospective pieces. No forward momentum. A year after that 2021 announcement, Reddit fans started calling the project completely dead. And this made fans wonder out loud if the movie revival was ever real, or was it a smoke signal that Blomkamp used in the hopes of reigniting the interest? The answer to that question is hard to say. In this generation, social media announcements basically drive the green lights, and it could be that Blomkamp was actually testing the waters to see if the enthusiasm was still there. And sure, it was there, but the lack of follow-through made it evident that without studio support and a new angle, this movie was not going to happen. And the phrase, "it's coming," is more like a delay tactic instead of a promise. Until now, for years, fans took Blomkamp's word as gospel. He said that District 10 was mapped out. He said it was coming. But with no film in sight, the possibility that the movie was never a plan at all? Insiders who were familiar with Blomkamp's post-District 9 career have mentioned that it's possible that the District 9 movie probably never progressed beyond some loose concepts. Even though there were several claims of a script being underway, there is no evidence of a locked draft or a shooting schedule. There was no proof of any kind of a formal developmental process. The only tangible output, if you can consider it that, was the tweet. But honestly, it was probably more like a vibe check anyway. So why was the sequel alive in public conversation? The answer is simple. District 9 was Blomkamp's magnum opus. It was lightning in a bottle where everything you can name, politics, passion, time, and talent, aligned just right. And revisiting that world is tempting. When Blomkamp revealed that he wanted to shift the setting of the second movie, the questions about authenticity crept in. Another big point was whether there was even a need for District 10. I mean, District 9 was a perfect standalone. Christopher Johnson's vow to return was nothing more than a mythic thread. Wikus's transformation is nothing but a tragic and unresolved fate. These loose ends were the emotional crescendos that elevated the movie. And that's why many fans felt that District 10 could end up weakening the first movie. The possibilities were endless. What if the sequel was disappointing? What if it oversimplifies the themes while over-explaining the mystery? What if it was stripped of all the intimacy and urgency that made the first film so beloved? Fans worried about those points a lot, and you can't really blame them. They do have valid reasons to think this way. I mean, take a look at the current sequel climate. However, the big elephant in the room that I haven't mentioned yet that would have definitely affected District 10's rating would be the time. District 9 came out in 2009, and now it's been over 15 years. If the sequel was released today, the audience that would see it have a completely different cinematic palette. The infamous Marvel fatigue has set in. Audiences have experienced genre-defining science fiction movies. Sci-fi has evolved. So, would there even be an appetite for District 10? In a way, yes and no. Yes, because fans have been waiting for a long time. No, because fans would only eat up District 10 if the movie brought something new to the plate. Suppose it came with vision, clarity, and purpose. Fans wanted relevance, not nostalgia. A sequel needed to hit all of those sweet spots or not bother showing up at all. In many ways, the myth of District 10 was more powerful than ever. Its absence had become its legacy. It represented potential that was unrealized. Blomkamp literally refused to get into the cash grab route just to preserve the creative integrity. This stance was both admirable and heartbreaking. So, was District 10 ever meant to happen? Maybe. Who knows? Whether District 10 would ever come to fruition or not, District 9 has happened, and it's already cemented its place in movie history. It's been over a decade since the movie came out, and it still remains one of the most original, emotionally resonant, and politically potent science fiction films of this century. When you look at the film on paper, the movie shouldn't have worked out as well as it did. It had no bankable stars. It was shot in this hybrid documentary style. There was body horror and social allegory mixed together. And it was set in Johannesburg, a place that is rarely seen in cinema. But that's the thing. All of these elements got together and made the film feel a lot more tactile and memorable. It embodied the very themes it wanted to explore, and we loved it. Wikus's transformation from the oppressor to the oppressed was not a twist. It was a commentary the entire time. A commentary on empathy, complicity, and dehumanization. As for Christopher Johnson, he was not just a good alien. He was a father who was displaced, mirroring so many marginalized people who are stripped of their agency. The prawns were supposed to be monsters, but you could understand through and through that they never were the monsters to begin with. In reality, the humans were the monsters the entire time, and by placing us in the shoes of Wikus, Blomkamp forced us to confront our own prejudices and privileges. Many films have come after District 9, but none of them have managed to achieve the balance that District 9 had. District 9 balanced action, visuals, and emotional weight with political commentary in a way that very few films can boast. It was a masterclass in allegorical storytelling, and it still is. And maybe that's why this movie stands strong without a follow-up at all. And you know what's ironic? The more time has passed without a sequel, the more legendary District 9 became. It's like the movie is frozen in amber, and it's the perfect storm of creativity and cinematic masterpiece, pieced together with relevance that no sequel could ever boast to recapture. District 10 is now an idea that simply exists in the collective imagination, and this version is perfect, even if it's a hypothetical one. It's completely untouched by studio interference and completely uncompromised by second guessing. So, in a way, it's ideal. And when District 10 arrives, if it ever does, it would not only be judged against the first film, but it would also be judged against 15 years of expectations. All hopes, all ideas that every fan cooked up in the past 15 years? That is what the District 10 movie would have to go up against if it ever comes out. It is the impossible standard, and I doubt a great film would survive the weight of the myth. Plus, there are other risks too. For example, the documentary-style filming of District 9 was fresh back in 2009, but now we don't know for sure. In this era, the whole found footage tropes are associated with low-budget horror movies, so if they do the same filmmaking, it might not hit as much as District 9 did back in 2009. Also, the themes of post-apartheid in District 9 would probably dilute in impact in District 10 if Blomkamp does go through with the idea that District 10 would take place in America, because the allegory that worked back then might not work now, when there's already so much literal socio-political storytelling. Also, the most important question that lingers is whether the story would even feel necessary. This one question dominates the entire conversation whenever the creation of District 10 shows up. It's not about when the movie would happen, but more about why the movie would happen in the first place. When District 9 came out, it didn't need any kind of world-building material. It didn't rely on any cliffhangers, Easter eggs, or teaser scenes. It was self-contained and emotionally comforting. Narratively speaking, it was satisfying. When we see the last scene, Weekus being completely transformed, building a flower from scrap metal, it's just as powerful today as it was in 2009, while he waited for rescue. It was melancholic, poetic, and tragic. It was a perfect end, or a perfect beginning, depending on how you see it, and it was okay. It was ambiguous, and we liked it for that. The fact that we don't know what happens to Weekus is okay. Because in the current media landscape, with so many reboots, spin-offs, sequels, etc., we have a movie here that said what it set out to say and stepped away when it was done. That is what legacy means. That is what restraint means. Marvelous verdict. So, what happened to District 10? In short, the sequel was left stuck in limbo in an ever-evolving world because of industry disinterest, creative caution, and shifting priorities. Neil Blomkamp had the desire, but he lacked certainty, and while Hollywood had the money, it lacked the patience. And the fans who had hoped, they were left in the dust waiting. If District 10 ever gets made, who knows what it would be like? At the end of the day, we all know that District 9 was never franchise material, and it never needed a franchise to matter. It stood for something. It was the message. Whether we see the prawns return to the screen or get any official word about District 10 remains up for debate. But until then, District 10 will always just remain a legend that gave us promise, mystery, and potential. And perhaps that is the most fitting sequel of it all. Alternate. And perhaps that is the most fitting sequel of all. Let us know what you guys think about District 10 not happening yet in the comments down below. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!